Marina Fernandez used to walk through the streets of the city center with a hurried pace, the bookstore apron tied with a double knot at the waist and a book under the arm that never would finish reading. I was 22 years old and a simple routine: get up early, have breakfast of bread with butter and weak coffee, drink the bus and spend hours between shelves, Dusty recommending titles that she same longed for can buy. Your life was marked for modesty, but also for certain peace, one feeling, that what was known was enough. He lived with his parents, Miguel and Rosa, in a humble little house with walls peeled, where the rules were many and the darling, although present, came wrapped in silences and mandates religious. When discovered that he was pregnant, a mixture of fear and hope settled in his chest. He thought in wait, in hide it. How about time would soften the news? But he couldn't more. One afternoon, returning from work with the laboratory, envelope in the hand and the heart agitated, he told them the truth. He did so standing, trembling in front of the dining room, while his mother stung onion and his father read his diary. This story barely gets started. Subscribe now, same to the channel. Comments that it seemed this first share, and share with your friends so you don't miss out the rest. The silence that followed his confession was further harder than any scream. Miguel squeezed the lips, left a newspaper on the table, and looked at her with a mixture of anger and shame. Rosa, her eyes shining and her hands wet with tears and onion, asked him to leave. "You have stained our name," he said his father without raising his voice, but with a firmness that did not leave place for reply. Marina did not beg. She took her bag, walked to her fourth. He saved the little he had and left without looking back. That night wandered aimlessly, calling to friends who did not attend, sending messages that went unanswered. 7 months pregnant, she ended up in a square in the old town, embraced by its belly under a wooden bench. The cold of the early morning penetrated him the bones, but it hurt less than the emptiness that I felt by inside. The sun had not yet set left when Diego Mendoza stopped his car in front of the square. He had the habit of walking early before starting the day, one routine that there was adopted after a heart attack that almost cost him his life for 2 years back. He was wearing clothes sporty chic and wore wireless headphones that she didn't use really, just to avoid conversations. He was a successful man, owner of a consultant financial recognized, and from a house where his silence reigned with more force than any luxury. That one tomorrow, while boarded the fountain dry, something caught his eye, a lump next to a bench. He approached cautiously, thinking that perhaps maybe he was a homeless person or someone asleep by excessive alcohol. But when he saw Marina with a pale face and open eyes looking at the gray sky, something stirred inside him. She looked at him without fear, without words. Like, yeah, I will no longer expect anything from the world. And yet, when he asked her, needed help, Marina just nodded. A time. He didn't explain anything. He didn't justify himself. He just accepted. Diego offered him take her to a hospital, but he shook his head. "I just need a place. Where? Sleep," he murmured. And in that phrase, so simple and broken, Diego recognized a past that he believed buried. He didn't insist. He took her to his guest house, a construction small and cozy at the back of your garden, with bathroom, kitchen and privacy. He left her the key, hot food on the table and her number on a piece of paper. "You are not forced to stay, but if you decide to do it, here you will be safe," she said before closing the door. Then she left, Marina sitting in front of a bowl of soup. He burst into tears by first time since it was expelled. Not out of sadness, but for something that puzzled her. Someone had treated with dignity, without knowing it. That night slept in a bed clean, with the stomach full and the heart unarmed. In the morning next, Marina woke up, startled, confused for the feeling of comfort. For a moment, he didn't remember where was. He sat down in bed and caressed his belly, noticing how Sophia, already there was chosen that name in secret, moved smoothly. In the kitchen, found a note written in calligraphy firm. "I am in the main house." If you need anything, just ring the porch bell." She hesitated. Part of her wanted to flee before that man changed his mind, before kindness had conditions hidden. But another part, more tired, she whispered to him, "How were you?" This time was different. At noon, when finally met courage, crossed a garden to the main house. Diego opened the door for her, as Ye would wait for one invited, not to estrange. Prepared tea, left her feel in his sofa, and listened to her. He didn't ask explanations. He did not do questions uncomfortable. "I'm alone," she said. Everything Marina said, and that was enough. During the following days, Diego maintained his distance without disappearing completely. It left small attentions. At the door of the guest house, fresh fruit, books, tea for the pregnancy, Marina still distrustful. She read each gesture as Ye would wait, find a double meaning, a trap, but there was not one. No one touched her without permission. No one raised their voice at her. No one asked her by the baby's father. It was that absence of pressure that began to soften it. One afternoon, while watering the plants in the garden, Diego approached with a box in his hands. "It's nothing special, but I thought I could serve you," he said. Upon opening it, Marina found maternity clothes and a pair of shoes, comfortable. I didn't know thank him or return it. In the end, he just said, "Thank you," and first time, he smiled. That smile marked a before and after. Since then, Marina started to leave the door of the guest house ajar. It was not an invitation explicit, but yes, a gesture of openness. Diego noticed it, and with the same subtlety with which he had initiated everything, began to sit down in his porch during the afternoons, reading newspaper or reviewing documents. They didn't speak a lot, but they shared silences comfortable. Marina, accustomed to measuring every word, he was surprised by himself, same when released comments spontaneous about weather, about a book that had read, or about the movement Sophia's restless in his belly. Diego didn't interrupt. He listened attentively, genuine, as each thing that she said had courage. I didn't try impress her, neither comfort her. I was just present, and that, for Marina, was new. One afternoon, rainy, while his sky was collapsing over the city, the light went out in the entire property. Diego played, gently opened the door, and offered it to him, have dinner in the main house, since the guest kitchen did not work with the generator. Marina accepted with some shyness. They ate reheated pasta by candlelight and talked by first, instead of things personal. Diego confessed to her that he had never had children, and that their loneliness was not because lack of options, but by fear. Sometimes you get so used to silence that you forget what it is like to live accompanied, he said, without looking directly. Marina understood it more than he wanted to admit. When dinner was over, he walked her to the door with an umbrella in hand. As they said goodbye, she said to him, "Thank you for not treating me as a burden." And that night, by first time since she was kicked out of the house, Marina slept without nightmares. Do you also think that small gestures, they can change lives? So subscribe so you don't miss out the rest of this history. Weeks passed, and Marina's routine was gone, filling with small certainties. Breakfasts quiet, walks in his garden, reading afternoons in his porch. With the Diego's permission, began to help in his personal library had at home, tidying up shelves, sorting specimens. It was a space spacious, with windows overlooking the patio, and there Marina felt useful, connected to something she knew. Her body, heavy by her pregnancy, found relief in his rhythm paused like that life knew. Diego, by his part, it seemed enjoyed the change. He smiled more. I left his office further early, and although never crossed a line that was not of respect, both knew that something different was germinating among them, something that did not depend on the past, not of blood, but of choice daily to accompany each other. One night, while they had dinner together, the Marina's cell. Phone vibrated on the table. It was Carlos, Sophia's biological father. He had blocked months ago, but somehow managed to contact her. Diego discreetly got up to give her privacy. but Marina asked him to stay. He attended with the speaker activated. Carlos, with voice nervous, it was direct. Are you sure you're going to keep that baby? Still can give it in adoption. You are not ready to be a mother, Marina. The air in the room, he turned dense. She didn't respond immediately. On she looked at Diego, who said nothing, just frowned. He frowned. Then, with a serenity that surprised her, he replied, I don't need you to agree. I do not need anything from you. And he hung up. Diego approached and placed a hand on her shoulder. You chose well, he said. Everything he said. Marina nodded, holding back tears. They weren't from sadness. They were from liberation. From that call, something in Marina changed definitively. It wasn't just that there was closed a door to the past, but there was taken a position firm in front of his future. He began to speak further openly with Diego about his fears, his plans, even about he approaching birth each time more. He, without invading, offered solutions practices, accompany her to appointments medical, hire a doula, adapt the house to receive the baby. You don't have to do it all alone, he told her naturally. And although she resisted at first to that idea, began to understand that accept help was not synonymous with weakness. It was a way of loving too. In one of those afternoons of confessions, Marina asked him by what had happened to her helped that tomorrow in the square. Diego, after a long silence, replied, because in your eyes, I saw something I knew very well, the pain of having no one. When broke bag, it was early in the morning. A sharp pain woke her up and she barely could reach his cell phone. Diego arrived in less than a minute, still with his pajama shirt buttoned wrong, and took her to the hospital without losing his calm. During the hours of waiting, he held her hand without letting go, dried her the sweat from her forehead, and reassured her with gentle words. When little Sophia was born, Marina felt such overwhelming love that some seconds he forgot about everything else. It was Diego who he called by at her request, and when doctor called him Dad, nobody corrected, in the room white, between the crying of the newborn born and the smile exhausted by Marina, something more than a was-born girl, was born a family. That night, as he hugged his daughter by first time, Marina knew that she would never further, I would return to be alone. Return home with Sophia in arms was the experience completely new. Marina, which until then there was experienced motherhood from uncertainty, it was felt wrapped by a support network I didn't expect find. Diego had prepared everything. The crib, the clothes, entire room converted in a small world for him baby. Every detail showed that he didn't do it by obligation, but because wanted to form part of that history. Marina, although grateful, it took a while some days and accept the dimension of that gesture. It was difficult for him believe that someone chose her so, with his scars, his history, and its daughter. But when I saw him rock Sophia, change diapers without complaining or getting up in the middle of the night just to make sure they both slept well, that distrust was starting to fall apart. It was like if Diego taught him, day after day, that true love didn't scream, neither promised, simply was. As the months passed, the ties deepened. Marina resumed her readings, wrote small texts during Sophia's naps, and even began to consider finish the literature degree that I had left unfinished. Diego encouraged her, without pressuring her. He same, that used to live submerged in work and routines lonely, began to arrive. Further early from work, to cook, to laugh more. One Sunday in the morning, while they had breakfast the three together, Marina dared to say in voice high what was coming feeling in silence. I don't know as explain it, but by first time I feel like I belong somewhere. Diego didn't respond immediately. He took her hand, and with a smile calmly, she said, this place I would no longer have sense without you. Marina looked at him with eyes full of tears. She didn't need a ring to know that her life there was changed forever. The formalization of your relationship was not marked for a big event, but by an accumulation of small acts of love. One day, Diego started saying, "Let's go in," instead of "I'm going," including them naturally in his plans. Another day, Marina surprised him calling him Dad in front of Sofia, without realizing it a count. It was like if life had tissue his union without the need for ceremonies, neither statements bombastic. Still, there was a key moment. On the girl's first birthday, Diego organized a small celebration in a garden with balloons, homemade cake, and some neighbors who barely they knew. Marina looked at him in silence while held Sofia in arms and joked with them guests. At the end of the day, when they collected the dishes, she told him, "You already are his father, but I want you to be legally one too." Diego looked at her surprised, moved. He didn't ask by what. He just said, "Yes." The adoption process was not easy, neither fast, but each signature, each court summons, was a confirmation more than they were willing to build something lasting. Marina participated in all with one mixture of nervousness and gratitude. There was past tense of sleeping in a square to walk by a court holding the hand of a man who had not only welcomed, but had elected love also, what she brought, I get. When finally received, he document that recognized Diego as Sofia's legal father. They framed it and placed it in the girl's room, among drawings of rainbows and stars. Marina, who had been expelled by his own blood, found on that paper a symbol of something much further strong. Family is chosen. And she, after so much pain, was learning to choose bravely. The news of his new life, it reached the ears of his parents almost by chance. An old one neighbor, who still he frequented church where Rosa and Miguel attended each Sunday, he commented having seen Marina with a man and a little girl in a book fair. They seemed happy, like a real family, he said, not knowing the impact of his words. Rosa, who had not stopped thinking in his daughter neither one night only. Since he kicked her out of the house, he felt a tremor in his hands. Miguel, more stiff, said nothing, but that night did not touch his soup, and by first time in a lot time, went up early to the room without turning on the television. The following days were silent and tense, until one Thursday in the afternoon, Rosa took his bag, put on her better blouse and said to her husband, "Let's go see her." "I don't care." "Yeah, you are not coming, but I need see her." Miguel took a while in react, but finally got up in silence, and it was for the car keys. Marina them saw arrive from the living room window. His first reaction, it was a start, almost a defense. He held Sofia in his arms, which was sleeping oblivious to the past. Diego, who was in the kitchen, he noticed his expression and asked him, "Yeah, I had to leave." She shook her head, breathed deep and opened the door. Rosa was the first in speak. "I know I don't deserve to be heard by you, but I've come because I love you, and because I was wrong." Miguel said nothing. He just hung his head, ashamed. Marina didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked at, hugging his daughter with strength. "You taught me to defend the values, relatives, but they denied when further than needed. Now I have a family, and I am in peace. If you want form part, it will be on my terms. I am not the same anymore." From that point on, things began to flow with more naturalness. Marina's parents, although still unsure, they began to call her more frequency, add interest by your day to day, to send him small gifts for the girl. Never they spoke too much about what happened, like if both sides understood that some wounds do not need words, but presence. Marina, by his part, did not open them all the doors, but he didn't close them either. He allowed them to be, as long as they remembered that she was no longer the daughter obedient who accepted all without question. Diego was a bridge silent in that process, providing support without protagonism. "They are part of your history," he told her, "but you decide what chapters. Write with them from now on in forward." With the time, Marina began to receive messages from others women of their past, schoolmates, neighbors, even some of the friends who didn't respond to her when I needed them the most. Most of them came with phrases as "you, I admire," or "I didn't know what to do at that moment," trying rebuild bridges that had left fall. Marina, without rancor, responded politely. She no longer needed approval, neither belonging. Their identity did not depend on those who had abandoned. One day, while was pushing Sophia's stroller by a park, a young man, with his face covered by a cap and hands trembling, approached her. "Are you Marina Fernandez?" he asked in a off. "I heard your story. He told it to me, a lady in his center community. I'm pregnant and I don't know where go." Marina looked at her by some seconds. He didn't do it questions. He just said, "Come with me." That gesture, as simple as the one Diego had with her months ago, sealed a new stage in his life. Marina and Diego decided to open a space in the women's guest house in situation of vulnerability. It was not a formal foundation, nor a refuge announced on social media. It was something more intimate, more human, a kind of home bridge, as it had been for Marina. Over the months, they received to 2 other girls, young people, each one with her history marked by abandonment and the fear. Diego adapted his garage and disuse as second accommodation space, while Marina cooked, guided, listened. She never positioned herself as savior. She only offered what she said there was received: respect, time, and a roof. Sure, each story touched her differently, but all reinforced the same truth. Nobody ought facing motherhood from rejection. And every time that a new life came into the world in that house, Marina felt the pain of the past slowly turn into something like purpose. Sophia was growing up surrounded by affection and diversity. In her, there was no environment a conventional family, but a community chosen, woven by women who held on nails to others. Sometimes, in breakfast, 3 mothers shared the table with 3 stories different and the same. Thread, resilience. Diego, although he was the only man in the middle of that universe feminine, did not feel out of place. There was found in that chaos, emotional, a harmony that your life structured had. Never given it to him. He kept his work, yes, but always I returned before sunset. I read stories to Sophia. I repaired taps, helped with market shopping. It was like, your house would have ceased to be a refuge, lonely, to transform in a seed of something greater. Marina, observing it play with the children of the others' women, he understood how deep was the love that he there was elected deliver. It was not just towards she or towards his daughter. It was towards everything that they represented, a second chance. One day, while we're preparing boxes with clothes and toys to donate to a shelter, Marina found a photo of you from when worked in the bookstore. It was clipped, wrinkled, but in his eyes, there was still something recognizable, the desire to be seen, to be valued. She stayed looking at her by some minutes, until Diego approached by behind. "Were you happy at that time?" he asked gently. "I thought so," she replied. She, without taking her gaze off, "But now I understand that I was just surviving." He saved the photo in a box aside, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder of how much there was changed. That night, after putting Sophia to sleep, she sat with Diego in a porch, like they used to do in the first days. "Do you think that what we are doing, does it really change anything?" she asked him. He looked at her without hesitation. "It changed it. Everything for me." The story of Marina and Diego began to extend further beyond the neighborhood. A social worker who had accompanied by one of the cases of the girls informally shared the existence of the place with colleagues. Soon they began to arrive discreet requests for help. A teenage mother expelled by his parents, a women undocumented foreigner who had been abandoned by his partner, a young person with a disability, mild pregnant by an elderly neighbor. Marina and Diego knew they couldn't welcome everyone, but neither they wanted to close the doors to those realities. So the idea of formalizing was born. He project, with the help of a lawyer friend of Marina, created a small association called Root of Home, inspired in the idea that everyone have a place where start over. They didn't receive donations, millionaires neither were front page news. But every day, one history, it was written differently in that land that was once only solitude and was now a nest, with the structure further. Organized, they also came challenges. Some girls, they arrived with deep traumas, with reactions unpredictable, with fears that required patience. Others, after receive help, they left without saying goodbye, like, yeah, the pain prevented them accept even gratitude. There were weeks difficult, where Marina hesitated. Yeah, was prepared to sustain so many lives besides yours. But in the moments of greatest tiredness, Diego was there. Sometimes with a hot mate, other times with silence, and other times simply taking her to give a lap in car when the emotional weight was too much. We can't save everyone, he told her, but we can make sure that no one feels as alone as you felt. That phrase, repeated like a mantra, he held Marina in the most days graze. Because I knew that his mission was not to cure world, but continue passing forward that chain of love that began on a park bench. If you made it this far, I'd prove it was worth it. Subscribe, comment on what you felt, and share. This history, Sophia, now 3 years, had been converted in the heart of that little one universe. He ran between the women's legs, asking by the babies, helped carry diapers and to sort blankets. Her laugh was a constant, and its curiosity a force contagious. For girls, newly arrivals, see to that little girl happy, confident and surrounded by love. It was a comfort unexpected. He reminded them that the future could be different from the past. One day, while playing with colored blocks, he asked Marina, "All our moms were also sad like you?" Marina crouched down at his side. Heighten replied, "Yes, my love. But now they have a house, they have warmth, and you give them joy." That night, as he slept, he thought how strange it was, destiny. She had given birth believing that she would have to raise her child alone, daughter. And now Sophia not only had a father, but also a community that loved her as if it were your own. One of the girls who most marked Marina was Luciana, a 17-year-old that arrived a late rainy, soaked, with the lips purple from the cold and dull eyes. He didn't speak, he didn't eat, he only hugged his belly as if it was the only thing she had left. For days, Marina tried approach without success. It was Sophia, with her innocence, who managed to break the wall. He approached him with a drawing, a yellow sun with a house underneath, and said, "Here can put you bed." Luciana did not respond, but the next day he ordered some soup, and on the third day he sat down next to Sophia to watch a movie. When finally he spoke, it was to say, "I thought I was going to die, but here I started breathing again." Marina hugged her without saying a word. In those gestures, silent found further sense than in any speech. As the project grew, so did the responsibilities. Marina and Diego knew they couldn't do it alone forever, so they started to form a support network with neighbors and professionals, volunteers and mothers who already had passed around the house. Some of them, like Clara and Juliet, decided stay near not by need, but by desire to give back. Clara, who was previously a cleaning assistant, began to study nursing and collaborated with the controls prenatal Julieta with cooking skills, organized workshops to teach recipes nutritious and economical. Each one, in her own way, wove part of the fabric of Raíz de Casa. Marina looked at them with pride. "No one came here to be saved. All we came to rebuild ourselves," he used to say. That horizontality, that absence of hierarchies rigid, was what gave soul to the place. There was no benefactors, neither beneficiaries, only people willing to walk together, even at a slow pace. One day, while Marina was organizing, nails boxes with clothes donated, received a handwritten letter with no clear sender. It was from an older woman who said have been a young mother in the 70s, forced to abandon your baby by family pressure. There was heard about root of home by a neighbor and wanted donate nails cribs, but also sharing his history. You this doing what I couldn't, giving coat where was judgment, give careful where was punishment. Marina read that phrase several times, The letter moved her more than any recognition public, because behind those words he understood that his work not only affected young people current, but also to girls who once time they were mothers and grew up with guilt as unique company. That night, sitting with Diego in the kitchen, she said, "I think that without meaning to, we are healing wounds, old ones, even the ones that aren't ours." He didn't reply. He just hugged her, like always toward when words were not enough. The impact of Raíz de Casa began to reach the ears of local journalists. First, it was a small note in a magazine community, then a report longer on a regional channel. Marina doubted about exposing oneself publicly. "I didn't want to be seen as a heroine, neither convert his history in spectacle." But Diego cheered her up with a simple sentence. "How many more people know that it is possible? More women. They will know that they are not there alone." So accepted an interview, with conditions clear, that there was no sensationalism, that the mother's privacy be respected, and that the focus were in the support network, not in his personal story. The journalist moved due to the delicacy of the place. It fulfilled his word. The report was broadcast on a Sunday in the afternoon, showing images of the rooms, the workshops, meals shared. Marina spoke in a calm voice, while Sophia, oblivious to everything, played in her garden with others' children. After the report, they arrived more letters, more mail, even some donation proposal. But they also arrived criticisms, sector evenings, conservatives who questioned her model. "They are rewarding irresponsibility," wrote an anonymous reader on a blog. Marina, upon reading it, felt a stitch in her stomach, but he didn't answer. Instead, he organized an open day in the house where the women could tell their stories in their own voices. It was a long day, with tears, laughter, silences dense, and lots of hugs. At the end of the day, Clara stood up and said, "None of us came here by comfort. We came because it was that or disappear." And that the applause that followed was not just for the words, but by everything they represented. Marina understood, so I didn't have to justify his existence. The lives transformed were he argument further powerful, and that none comment malicious could delete. Sophia, now almost 5 years, I began to do questions further complex about his origin. One afternoon, anyone, while he was drawing with crayons, looked at Marina and asked, I have been in you, Belly, right? And what was it like when we lived alone?" Marina stayed in silence by some seconds. I didn't want to lie to him, but neither loaded with more history of which I could understand. He sat down at his side and calmly replied, "Yes, my love, you were in my belly, and it was a time difficult. Mom was very sad, but then we met Dad Diego and everything changed." Sophia nodded thoughtfully, then said, "So you were born to other time, right?" Marina looked at her with moist eyes. She had never thought so, but the logic childishness of his daughter was exact. Yes, there was reborn, on that park bench, when thought that everything was lost, in Diego's embrace, in each woman who touched his door, in Sophia's laughter. In one of the anniversaries of Raíz de Casa, they decided to plant a tree in her main garden. They called it the decision tree, because each woman passing by around the house, I could hang from its branches a message, a word, a promise written in paper recycled. At first, it was just the initiative symbolic, but soon the tree was filled with colors. There was messages like, "I trusted again," "I chose stay," "I am not alone," "My daughter saved me," "I forgave myself." Each hanging leaf was a living testimony of what they were building. Marina, when reading them, felt that her history, it, was no longer just his. It was part of something bigger, broad, more collective, a movement silent that grew with strength in the midst of tenderness. That afternoon, Diego took her hand and whispered, "This began by you, but now already belongs to the world." That tree, with its branches loaded with words, became into a symbol for all those who arrived. Many of them, at first, did not understand what it was or what it was for served, but it was enough to see to another mother hang his own sheet so they could understand his meaning. It was a way of leaving fingerprint to validate your passage through that refuge without the need for great speeches. One night, while it was raining strong and the lights had gone out for a failure electric, they all gathered in a candlelit dining room lit. Luciana, already with her baby months-old arms, he read his message in voice high. "I thought it was garbage, but I learned that I am also a seed." The others saved silence. Marina felt that her throat closed. That phrase summarized everything they were, everything they did. Someone who had arrived without speaking, now was teaching to others that were worth its stay. Diego, although continued being he back firm and loving of the project, there was taken up again with force his role as a father. He took Sophia to kindergarten, helped her with her homework, taught her to walk in bicycle. Their bond was so natural that no one remembered since they did not share blood. One day, while he was combing her hair before going to sleep, she asked him, "How did you know you wanted to be my dad?" Diego bent down next to her, height, thoughtful, and replied, "Because when I saw you by first time, I knew I couldn't do it anymore. Imagine my life without you." Marina, who heard from the door, he felt that his chest expanded. It wasn't just gratitude, it was a deep certainty. There was chosen well. The love they created was not borrowed, nor conditioned. It was real, it was every day, and it was sustained in the acts simpler. In that family built by hand, every day was a confirmation silent that the abandonment was not the end, but he beginning of everything. One of the initiative's further specials that emerged with the time was Circle Day. Once a month, all women, including those who already had graduated and lived by his account, they met in Humane Garden, sitting in round. There was no issue fixed, neither structure, just a space to share what they needed say, without interruptions, neither trials. Some, they talked about their progress, a job achieved, one reconciliation, a birthday celebrated. Others they shared frustrations, relapses, fears, and many simply they cried, knowing that there was nothing to do there, lack pretend fortress. Navy rarely intervened, but his mere presence was an anchor. When it was his turn, he turned, used to saying, "I keep learning. Each one of you teaches me something new," and it was true. Each story transformed her. Each woman was a mirror other than itself same, reminding her that all they loaded wounds, but also a ability infinite rebirth. During one of those circles, a young mother called Jasmine, he confessed that he still thought in return to the man who had her abused. Because sometimes having something, even if it's bad, seems better than being alone, she said, her voice breaking. The silence was immediately. Marina breathed deep and delicately, asked her, "What if alone is not the same as empty? What if you could fill yourself with yourself before someone else more?" Yasmin didn't respond, but a week later following began therapy with a psychologist voluntary. It was a small step, but significant. So Raiz de Casa worked, without impositions, without haste, just sowing trust. Marina had learned that healing was not a destination, but a slow path, full of twists and turns. But the important thing was not to arrive to some perfect place, but walk it accompanied, because together, even he, past further hard, could become in seed. With the passing of the years, the original house began to fall small. The calls for help grew, and Marina debated between the desire to expand and the fear of losing the essence. It was Diego who proposed a solution. Buy he land vacant lot next door and build a second one module, replicating the warmth and structure of the first. It would not be a hostile cold, neither an impersonal institution. It would be an extension of the home they had created, with the same garden shared, the themselves colors on the walls, and on everything, the same welcoming spirit. They achieved volunteers, architects sensitized to the cause, and even donations anonymous that covered part of the project. When they finished the work and opened the doors of the new space, Marina toured the rooms in silence. He touched the walls with his palm open, like, yeah, I would like to absorb your energy. And when you reached the last room, hung up at the entrance one small wooden plaque that said, "Here you don't start from scratch. Here you begin from hope." In that new stage also arrived an unexpected letter. It was from Carlos, Sophia's biological father. They had passed more than 6 years from his last communication. In the about permission, a photo of you, more aged, and a handwritten sheet. "I'm not looking sorry," he said. "I just wanted you to know that I saw you around television. And even though I don't deserve it, I'm glad to know that my daughter is alive, loved, and happy. I'm not going to get closer. I just needed say it." Marina read the letter with emotions found. I didn't feel I hate it, but neither tenderness. It was like reading someone else's story. He kept the letter in a box next to others' papers important, not out of nostalgia, but by closure. That night, she told Diego about the message, and he only replied, "The past knocks on the door, but you decide if you leave it come in." Marina nodded. She already there was elected he present. The weather began to be measured not by stations, but for arrivals and departures en route of home. Every woman who went out with her baby in arms left a brand, a memory, a word in the tree, and many sometimes also a promise to revisit. Some, they returned with their children further great to greet. Others, they wrote letters, and others simply disappeared, which was also valid. They had continued his path. Marina learned to let go without anguish. She no longer needed retain anyone to feel that their work had sense. The impact was in the seeds, not in the visible flowers. One day, while organized a box with drawings, ancient Sophia found one where appeared 3 figures. One girl, a woman with long hair, and a man with a hat above, with letters crooked. It said, "My real family." Marina hung it up on the wall without saying anything. Diego, seeing it, smiled. He knew that drawing was more valuable than any recognition public. In it, 7th anniversary of the projectee, they decided do a celebration intimate. No speeches formal, neither guests external, only them. The women who lived, cried, grew and laughed within those walls. A community lunch was held, where each cooked some of his history. Empanadas from the north, rice pudding from the south, soup Paraguayan, homemade bread, mate cocido. In the middle of the meal, Sophia, now 7 years and character strong, he asked to speak. He climbed onto a chair and said, "Thank you for make me grow surrounded by so many moms, brave ones. I learned that family is not who tea does, but who tea take care." No one applauded immediately. They were all with their throats tight. Then the pop was unanimous. Marina hugged her tightly, in feeling that those words did not come from just one girl, but of all them, because Sophia was not just her daughter. It was the heart of all they had created. As time went by, some of the women who had been receptions began to form his own support network in other areas of the city. Clara, for example, opened a small space in your neighborhood where offered support, emotional and first classes, aid for single mothers. Julieta started a cooking workshop with a focus labor, teaching recipes, practices for selling at fairs or by order. Each one of them was wearing with him a part of root of home, not as a copy, but as a seed that they adapted to their own land. Marina remained in contact, but did not intervene. He trusted. There was learned that leading was also letting go, letting others build their roads autonomously. In an update meeting, Clara said something that stuck engraving. "Here we are not gave charity. They gave us look, and for that, now we also look to others." That echo of recognition was the true legacy of the project. One autumn afternoon, Marina found herself alone in her garden, something unusual. Sophia was in a music class, Diego in a meeting, and the girls of the house had left for the hospital with a volunteer. She sat under the decision tree, already large, full of dry leaves mixed with papers colorful, closed eyes and breathed. For the first time in a lot time, was allowed be in silence. With him same, he remembered that evening in the square, the cold bench, the belly tense, the feeling of having been forgotten by everyone. And then he thought in everything that came after. Diego, Sophia, the women, the hugs, the losses, the births, laughter. A solitary tear ran down her face on the cheek, not from sadness but from fulfillment. "We did it," he murmured to the air, without waiting answer. And the wind, soft, moved the branches of the tree like, like confirm it. Shortly after that moment of introspection, Marina received an invitation unexpected. A local university wanted to give her an award by his social work. At first he hesitated. He wasn't interested. The awards, neither the scenarios. But Diego, with his usual calm, told him, "It is not because it's for all those who couldn't receive it." That convinced her. On the day of the event, she took the stage, dressed simply, accompanied by Sophia and Clara. In front of an audience full, did not read a speech prepared. He just spoke from his heart. He told briefly his history, without victimhood, neither drama, and closed with a phrase that made everyone stand up. "Don't recognize me. Recognize that there are hundreds of women who just need someone to tell them, here are safe. If we can be that someone, even if it's just a time in life, then already we did something important." The ovation hard minutes. But the most valuable was not his applause, but the letters that arrived after, of students, teachers, mothers, all touched by his true, that same one. At night, when she returned home, Sophia asked her if it had been since nervous in his stage. Marina laughed and replied, "A lot, but thinking in you gave me strength." The girl hugged her by the waist and said naturally, "Then I won too, he prize." And yes, in a way, there was cattle, because Sophia was the root of everything, the reason for which Marina did not give up fall, the spark that awakened in Diego a love that neither I knew I could give, the girl who, with her existence, there was joined by dozens of women different in the same purpose. Marina looked at her sleep that night with a mixture of wonder and gratitude. I didn't know that future awaited him, but I had one thing clear. While his daughter still growing in a world where women took care of each other, everything there would be, it was worth it. With the passing of the years, the dynamics in root of home, they left adapting to new realities. Some of the women receptions were migrants, others they came escaping from trafficking networks, and many they arrived with children, older people, not just babies. Marina understood that it was no longer enough to offer shelter and food. It was necessary to enlarge the resources, access to education, care, psychological constant, legal advice. With the help of a network of collaborators, volunteers began to build alliances with human rights institutions and organizations. Diego took care of much of the bureaucracy, while Marina continued to run the day-to-day business. With her ear attentive and his intuition fine, the house continued being his same usual refuge. But now it was also a center of profound transformation. Each story was treated as unique, without formulas, neither labels. We are not a service. We are a pause to breathe again. They explained to those who they wanted. Collaborate. In the middle of that expansion, a new challenge arose. A 15-year-old teenager named Brisa arrived accompanied by her 4-year-old little brother. They had run away from home violent and walked more than 3 days until reaching the city. At first, Brisa refused to speak. She only slept hugging her brother, with his eyes open well into the night. Marina decided not to pressure her. She left him food, clothes clean, and a space to be, no questions asked. They passed almost 2 weeks until Brisa, early morning, he sat down at his side in the kitchen and said, "Never nobody believed me. I just wanted someone to believe me." Marina didn't respond with words. She offered a cup of warm milk and simply held her gaze. It was enough. From that day on, Brisa began to speak, and in doing so, she also began to heal, like so many others before her. Breeze found in Sophia, an unexpected friend. Although the age difference was noticeable, they shared a sensitivity similar. Both understood the value of silence and the security of a look honest. They began spending evenings together in her garden, playing with dolls, drawing, or simply lying down in the grass, looking at the clouds. One day, Brisa taught Sophia how to do a paper kite with reeds and scraps of fabric. When they finally blew it up, Marina watched from the kitchen with shining eyes. "Do you see that?" Diego said to his side. "That is where live hope, in simple things, and made with wounded hands." That phrase was left floating in Marina's memory for days because it was true. It didn't. A great miracle is needed to transform lives. Sometimes it was enough a kite, a shared game, a cup of tea at the end of the day. Small gestures that, repeated constantly, wove something more stronger than any structure: community. The presence of Brisa and her little brother also brought new learning for all. It was the first time they welcomed a group of siblings with such different ages. They had to reorganize spaces, routines, even rules of coexistence, but far from being a problem, it was an opportunity. The other mothers collaborated generously. Some were preparing snacks, others they took care of the small. When Brisa was therapy, that spontaneous network reaffirmed what Marina already I sensed. The maternal did not depend on a uterus, but on an attitude. One day during an internal meeting, one of the volunteers knew. He asked, "And who is the director here?" They all looked at each other and laughed. "It depends on what day and what problem," Julieta replied. Marina smiled, in silence. That was exactly what had happened, dreamed. A place where leadership was shared, where each A could be a guide and an apprentice. A place where none women had to carry the weight of the world alone. With the A's, time went by. Marina and Diego began to think as ensure the continuity of the project further beyond them. Not because felt that their cycle was being closing, but because they understood that Reis de Casa was already more larger than its founders. They began training a small group of women who had passed around the house, and now they lived independently. They were taught about management, conflict mediation, administration basic, and accompaniment emotional. Some discovered same a vocation new. "Never I imagined I could lead something," Clara said while reviewed a shopping list to stock the pantry. "But here I discovered that I also know care from he to do." Marina observed those processes with emotion. "I knew that letting go was not abandoning, but trust. And every time that one of them took a decision important by his account, felt that the dream continued growing, branching out, like the tree in his garden." Sophia, by his part, it was already a curious and sharp girl, with questions that sometimes they took everyone by surprise. One night, while they had dinner in family, asked, "What if when I grow the house no longer exists?" Diego looked at her tenderly and replied, "The house is not just he building, it's everything we sow here, and that lives in many people, not only in us." Marina stayed thoughtful. That night, while wrapped Sophia in his bed, whispered in her ear, "If one day this house changes shape, you will be able to do it again, wherever, because you already have it inside." It was a promise and a blessing, and although they didn't know it still, those words would be key to what was to come after, because the foundation's further. Strong people are not made of cement, but of memory, of bonds, of meaning, and Sophia understood that better than anyone. One spring morning, while they watered his garden, Marina received a call that left her in silence. It was the Municipal Policy Department social. They had been selected to receive a grant important that would allow replicate home route model in other neighborhoods. But there were a condition. They had to form an entity, legal, further complex, with bylaws, a presidency, and a governing council. Marina hung up the phone without speaking. Diego, who knew her well, just waited. After a while, he said, "I am afraid that the institutional will kill what we did with the heart." He replied calmly, "Then come on to make sure he doesn't do it." Along with the women further nearby, organized several meetings. To decide together how move forward, they voted, debated, and horizontally elected those who would integrate he advice. Marina did not apply. She preferred continue in the mud, in listening daily, in the kitchen, in the arms open. I knew that his force was there, and now others could also hold the rest. The expansion of the project brought new challenges, but also new ones, stories of hope. In the second center open, located in a peripheral neighborhood, the first women in arrive was a young deafie pregnant with twins. Her name was Milagros, and she didn't know sign language. There was been maid isolated, and no one until then there was tried communicate really with her. The first weeks were complicated. Marina went to visit her several times, and although they did not speak with words, they shared gestures, smiles, and long hugs. One day, Milagros took his hand and placed it about his belly. It was his way of saying thank you. From then on, several volunteers began to study sign language. It is not because she only, Marina said, it's because all those that will come. Because if there was something learned in all those years, it was that a true house does not exclude. It adapts, it stretches, it transforms to embrace better. The birth of the Milagros twins was one of the events further touching that Marina had witnessed. The second center, I didn't have everything yet, he equipment ideal doctor, but thanks to the rapid intervention of Clara and a midwife voluntary, everything. It went well. When they held the U-drink by first time, the young mother did not say one word, just squeezed strong the hands of both women and cried. He cried with the body whole, like who finally let go, years of misunderstanding. Marina returned home that evening exhausted, but with the heart swollen. Sophia, curious as always, he asked her, yeah, someday they might have further U-drink in her house too. Maybe not here, Marina replied, stroking him hair, but already have many children of the watered soul by he world. That phrase stuck with Sophia. She began to draw baby trees with branches coming out of a house and holding happy faces. Marina kept each I draw carefully, knowing that this childish way of understanding love was, in he background, the wisest. With the growth of the centers, stories also arrived further complex. Women with addictions severe, victims of abuse institutional, even cases unresolved. Legal issues. The team began to require attention, professional further specialized. Marina accepted that they needed psychologists permanent, workers social with experience, and advice continuous legal. It was no longer enough to have goodwill and listening empathetic. But that didn't mean give up your essence. He made sure that each professional who will join understood what Raiz de Casa was, a space of deep humanity, not a file more. During a training, a lawyer newly incorporated asked, "What is the boundary between accompanying and saving?" Marina responded without hesitation, "We do not save anyone. We maintain while the other learn to walk. And when walk, we celebrate, although don't look back anymore." That philosophy became in his motto, silent equipment, a compass in the midst of the difficult. One day, after a long day, Marina found in his bag a handwritten note by one of the new one's residents. It was brief, almost shy. "Thanks for not asking me anything the first day. That saved me." Marina read it several times. That phrase reminded him of his own early days, when all I needed was space to breathe. No questions asked, neither explanations. He saved the paper in your memory box important, along with the letter from the oldest woman of the 70s, the drawing of Sophia, and the first hanging leaf in the decision tree. That night, as he went to bed, he said to Diego, "Sometimes I think what we did is not build a place, but invent other language, one where you don't have to say so much to be understood." Diego, half asleep, just murmured, "Then you did poetry with life." And they stayed hugged in silence, with the certainty that he was not doing anything nothing else is missing. With the passing of the years, the centers already added up 3, and there were accompanied more than 200 women. But Marina never allowed herself feel too much big. I kept getting each one with a hot tea, a welcoming gesture, a folded blanket on the bed. Sophia, now 12 years, had been converted in a presence active. Sometimes helped to order, others took care of the children small while their mothers went to therapy or to paperwork. In a occasion, while accompanied a girl, very young man who had just arrived, said to him, "My mom says that everything it starts with looking pretty. I think it's true." Marina heard that phrase from another's mouth, volunteered days later, and couldn't avoid smile. Her daughter was sowing words without realizing it account, words that became root, consolation, beacon. And that, Marina thought, was the greatest legacy she could leave it to the world. An autumn, especially cold, the main house received again to someone who would change all without anyone knowing at first. Her name was Alma. She had 20 years and came from other province, escaping from a relationship violent. She arrived without clothes, without papers, without knowing how follow. Marina welcomed her with the same usual gesture, a blanket, a tea, a room calm. But Alma was not like the others. She seemed notice all from far away, with a look that did not surrender. They passed weeks without speaking more than the minimum, until one day he found Sophia alone in her garden crying because it had been fought with a friend. Alma approached, crouched down at her side and, without saying a word, taught him as braid a branch dry in the shape of a heart. Sophia stopped crying. From that moment on, Alma began to open up little by little, not with stories, but with gestures. She embroidered blankets for the babies, cleaned the kitchen without anyone asking, sat next to those who were crying. Silence. His way of caring was different, but just as powerful. One day, while they organized a writing workshop for the residents, a voluntary asked that I would write a phrase about what root of home meant to them. Mosty wrote things as my salvation, my refuge, the place where I started again. Alma wrote a single line with letter small and firm. Here, nobody forced me to be happy, and for that, I started to want be it. Marina felt a lump in the throat when reading it. Sometimes I thought I couldn't do it anymore, be surprised, that there was heard all forms of pain. But Alma taught him that there was other way to reach, another way to heal. Every woman brought a new language, and root of home was the place where those languages could be translated in love, without haste, without noise, without conditions. Marina began to notice that as time went by, many women passing by around the house, they not only healed, but they also recovered the ability to dream. They not only wanted to survive, they wanted study, work, fall in love again, raise their children with dignity. That gave him the idea to create a small microcredit network internal, without interest, so that they could start their own ventures. Diego, with his experience financial, designed a system fair based in trust and collaboration. The project was called First Step, and soon initiatives beautiful, one small bakery home, sewing service, candle making, artisanal sale of baked goods. Every time a woman returned the first loan, Marina organized a snack symbolic with all. Not to celebrate money, but autonomy, because their go out forward was not synonymous with leaving. It was synonymous with flourishing. Success. Here we do not measure in square meters, Marina said, but in the ability to look in the mirror again and like yourself. During one of those snacks, one young called Natalia, who had opened his own natural cosmetics stand, said something that stuck resounding. When I arrived, I couldn't hold the gaze. Today, I have clients who ask me advice, and all they laughed, excited. Marina clapped, her eyes filled with tears. She knew what that change meant. It wasn't vanity, it was identity recovered to become a person again after having been reduced to one shame, to a problem, to a silence. That same in the afternoon, when saying goodbye, Natalia left a small jar of cream with a label that said, "Made in Freedom." Marina kept it in his desk, next to others' memories sacred. It was just an object, but enclosed a world, and that world, built by so many hands, continued growing, not by charity but by justice, not for obligation but for love, a love that doesn't ask, it only offers, that doesn't invade, it only waits. With the success of the First Step program, they arrived new challenges that Marina had not anticipated. Visibility, public, began to attract the attention of outsiders with interests different. Some businessmen wanted to associate his mark, the cause to clean up your image. Others proposed donations, millionaires in exchange for placing their names in the centers. Marina, firm, refused anything that would compromise the essence of the project. "We don't sell dignity," he said. It was a time for decisions difficult, where had to learn to say no even to proposals tempting. Diego supported her, but also reminded her that sustainability was important. So, they looked for other paths. They created a virtual store where they could sell their products with complete autonomy, using the Raíz de Casa network only as boost platform. Success was immediate. In a few weeks, the orders multiplied. Marina felt pride, but also relief. They had found a way to grow without losing the soul. One night, already late, checking the orders with Julieta, Marina found a message from a shopper who said, "Thank you for what you do. I went to a single mother, and although never happens by there, I feel that you are with me the same." That phrase moved her deeply. It was proof that the scope of what they had created was going a lot further beyond the walls of the centers. There were planted something that traveled, that touched hearts anonymous, which inspired quietly. The next day, he shared his message with all in his breakfast. "Breeze, that now worked as in charge of the second center," he said with a smile. "We are writing a history that has no name own, and that is the most cute." Marina looked at her for a long time. There was arrived mute, trembling, with her little brother in arms, and now he was a leader, a guide, a living testimony of what was possible. It was then when Marina understood more clarity that root of home, already it didn't belong to him. It belonged to the world. As time went by, they began to receive invitations to give talks in schools, centers, community and universities. But Marina didn't want to become a figure public. "I preferred them to be my own women who will tell their stories in their words, with their times." So was born He Own Voices project, a series of meetings where residents and former residents, they shared his experience with students, health professionals, assistants, social, and anyone who wanted listen. There was no script, just one microphone open, chairs in circle, and a ruler, Clara, whose speech should not be interrupted. The first in Cheer Up, it was Luciana, the young woman who had arrived without speaking, hugging her belly. He told his history with the voice, firm without drama, like if there was one rehearsed 1,000 times. But in the end, his eyes filled with tears. "They didn't ask me here that I did. They asked me that needed, and that changed everything." There was silence, then applause, and then many more were encouraged. Sophia attended in silence to many of those meetings. Already with 13 years, there were developed an unusual sensitivity for his age. He took notes, made questions respectful. He wrote phrases that he then posted in his room. One night, while they had dinner as a family, he asked them, Do you think love is inherited?" Diego replied, "Love is not inherited, Sophie. It is learned. And you learned from the best way." Marina looked at her tenderly, recognizing in his daughter not just one witness of everything experienced, but also a bearer of the future. "I knew that one day she would continue a way to your way." And that gave him peace, because, in the end, more important to have founded a house was to have planted the conviction that each life, for further broken that arrives, can rebuild. You find a space where to be looked at without judgment. A space where return to starting is not a punishment, but a chance. A winter particularly hard brought home one story that shook everyone. It arrived an older woman, almost 60 years. with a granddaughter little girl in his care. Her name was Teresa, and she was not a new mother, neither victim of a violent partner. She was a grandmother and had picked up at his granddaughter after her daughter disappeared in a trafficking network. Nobody knew exactly what do at the beginning. Teresa's profile was not common in Raíz de Casa, but Marina didn't hesitate. She offered him a room, 1 cup of coffee, and the same listening that she offered to everyone. Teresa spoke little, but her hands never stopped. She cared for the others, cooked, knitted blankets, fixed things, broken. One afternoon, while darning a sheet, he said in low voice, "I was a teenage mother too, but before there were no houses like this." Marina approached her and hugged her without saying anything, because understood perfectly what those words carried, a whole history of silences. Teresa's presence brought her energy new. Many girls were looking for her as figure maternal, although she denied it. "I didn't come to be an example of anything," she repeated, but it was impossible not to see her as such. One night, in a conversation circle, a young man asked him as there was made to follow forward so many years. Teresa thought for a long time and replied, "Never I had option. But now, for first time, I feel like I'm choosing something." That phrase was left recorded in all of them. Marina repeated it on a wooden sign they hung at the entrance of the center. "Now I choose." It was a statement, a slogan, a true, powerful, because many they arrived at Raíz de Casa after a life without power, choose nothing, and start doing it, even if it was in the most minimum. What to eat, how comb your hair when speaking, was the first step towards freedom. Teresa became a symbol of that it is never too late to choose distinct. Upon completion 14 years, Sofia received a proposal that filled her with emotion, to participate in a school project fair social. She had to present something that represented her, and she didn't hesitate in choose home route as topic. Marina was surprised to see her so determined, putting together posters, printing photos, ancient and writing small stories in paper recycled. "I want them to see that houses can also born from people and not from plans," he said with conviction. On the day of the fair, his exposure was the most visited. Teachers, students and parents stopped to read, to ask questions, to get excited. Sofia spoke confidently, explaining concepts as accompaniment, network, community, with admirable maturity. At the end of the day, a mother approached him with moist eyes and said, "I was once too a navy. I wish had there existed a place, so when I needed it." Sofia took his hand and said, "Maybe now you can help it exist for another person." Marina, who watched all from a corner, he felt that his daughter already there was started to fly. That same 1 year, Sofia organized the first meeting of children, a day designed for the boys and girls who grew up in the centers. "Always, we talk about mothers, but we also have things to tell," he explained. With the help of Julieta and Brisa, they prepared games, activities artistic, and a small space where the boys could draw or write what they felt. What emerged was powerful. Many spoke by first instead of what they remembered. Nights of fear, hugs that healed, moving house, new friends. Marina was left moved. There was forgotten, in the midst of doing diary, that those children were also witnesses, were also survivors. From that day on, they were implemented spaces regular for them, because in a real house, everyone have voice, and that of the further small, sometimes, is the most clear. With each, as the year passed, the decision tree became further leafy. Some of its branches even began to invade her porch of the main house. Marina refused to prune it. She said the tree was free, like the stories she held. But one day, during a storm strong, several sheets of paper flew and fell by all he garden. The next day, while they were picking them up, Sofia was reading in voice high the messages I found. "I learned to look at myself without fear." I returned to hug. I dared to cry in voice high. Marina decided laminate them one by one so they wouldn't get lost. They did with them a wall in a dining room common, and they called it the Wall of Truth. There, each phrase I remembered that no one arrived completely broken. that each woman brought inside a strength that only needed space to go out, and that space was what they, among all of them, had built. The day that Raíz de Casa turned 10 years, they did a celebration simple but full of meaning. There was no guest special, nor authorities, nor press. Only women who had passed by there, their children, and those who formed part of the project from inside. Each one brought something to share, a meal, a photo, a song. It was made around big in the garden, and each person lit a candle for what there was found in that house. Marina lit hers and said, I found purpose. Diego said, I found family. Sophia, with a trembling candle in his hands, he said, I was born here, and I know that this place is not made of walls. It is made of hugs. There was applause, tears, silence. They did not lack more words, because in that round was all the important things, the origin, the struggle, the network, the love, a house that was not inherited by blood, but by choice. Years further late, when Marina turned 50, received a surprise that left her speechless. Sophia, along with Diego and several of the women who had passed around the house, they organized a ceremony intimate to give him a notebook, artisanal, full of letters. They were messages handwritten by dozens of women, each telling what root of home meant in his life. Here I sang again. Here I slept without fear by first time. Here my son was born, and also my hope. Marina read the pages a by one, with eyes full of tears. She didn't feel deserving of so much. Always there was thought I was just fulfilling its consciousness with something that life herself had entrusted. But that notebook showed him other thing, that his actions every day, silent. There were left footprints, real, deep, eternal. It was Diego who told her that night, while he caressed the covers of the notebook. You did not build a house, Marina. You changed the map of many lives. That doesn't go away. Never. As time went by, Sophia began to speak in interviews, in congresses, in youth meetings. I didn't do it from a place of exposure, but of testimony. I grew up in a house of many mothers, she said proudly. She spoke of what she had learned, what she had experienced, and also of what she wanted. Build. Marina listened to her with a mixture of excitement and wonder. I saw in his daughter not one heiress, but a creator. Because Sophia wasn't there repeating his history. He was creating his own, with other words, other forms, but his same love as root. One day, after a chat in a university, a student approached Sophia and said, Your story gave me desire to do something useful with mine. And she, with the maturity that always there was, had she replied, Then already it was worth it. Marina, upon learning of this, knew that the legacy was safe. When he project turned 15, they decided to do a time capsule. Every person who has ever passed by Root of Home could leave an object, a letter, a photography, or even a handwritten song. They buried a box sealed under the Tree of Decisions, with the intention of opening it within another 15 years. Marina placed in she a copy of his first drawing made for Sophia, the one who said, My real family. Diego wrote a letter where I was grateful by have learned to love without fear. Sophia, now almost adult, left a notebook with ideas for the future. I want there to be a house like that in every city in the world, he wrote, and that the girls who today do not have voice know that everything can start with one look friendly. It was an exciting day, with laughter, tears, and the promise of reunion when the tree was bigger great and the lives further wide still. After that event, Marina began to take further distance of the operation daily, not by tiredness, but by wisdom. I knew it was coming. He time to let others will lead. Brisa assumed the general coordination. Clara the part administrative. Julieta lost training programs. Sophia, now 19 years, I began to think in study social work or psychology. I don't know that qualification I want to, he said to Marina, but yeah, I know. What for wanna use it? Marina hugged her strong. She herself there was achieved everything without diplomas, only with instinct and conviction. See your daughter. Walking with purpose confirmed that he was not doing anything, lack be always ahead to follow transforming. One day, while he was watering the plants, Juliet approached him and asked him if I didn't feel fear of letting go. Marina replied, "Calm. I'm not letting go. I am opening space for everything we so follow, growing without limits." And that was perhaps his greatest act of faith. Little time. Then, Sophia proposed something that surprised everyone. She wanted to open a room center, but not in your city, but in other province. In a small town where it did not exist, none service similar. Marina listened to her attentively, without interrupting. Sophia spoke with passion, with arguments, with a vision clear. There was investigated a place, known to some women of the region, and dreamed of a space simpler, but just as powerful. "I don't need you to do it with me, Mom. I just need you to believe that I can." Marina smiled, her eyes full of pride. "I don't just believe you can. I know you will. Better." It was the blessing Sophia needed. Months later, with the support of the team, she opened a small shelter with the same name, the same spirit, but with his own identity. At the entrance, in once-in-a-while foundation plate, placed a phrase that said, "Nobody arrives late to the place where will be look with love." Marina traveled for the inauguration, but stayed in background. I watched Sophia give directions, greet the new residents, organize his space with the naturalness of someone who there was born for that. Diego, to his side, squeezed her hand and whispered, "Mission accomplished." But Marina didn't feel it like an ending. He lived it as an expansion, because Sophia not only replicated what she there was, fact, but multiplied it. It took a step further, a turn on a new one route. That one night, while we're sleeping in a room improvised from the new center, Sophia said to her, "Mom, any time you imagined all this?" Marina looked he wooden roof, thoughtful, and replied, "No, daughter, I just wanted you not to have to be born alone." Sophia hugged her strong, and in that hug was the whole story. What began on a park bench now was flourishing in others' floors, with new hands, new voices, new beginnings. With the new center in March, Marina began to dedicate herself to write. "I didn't mean to publish a book, neither become an author recognized. I just wanted leave registered, everything lived. For if one day your memory was weakening or someone further needed understand, as there was started everything." I wrote in a hardcover notebook, each night from the kitchen silent. He counted the beginnings, doubts, the errors, the miracles every day. He narrated in detail the history of each woman who passed by around the house, with names changed and open endings. "I don't want them to be forgotten," he said. "I want someone, in some future, read this and know that it was real." Sophia encouraged her, helped with dates, contributed memories that Marina had deleted. "Maybe one day this, yes, it is a book," said the daughter, "one that travels and touches others' lives." But Marina didn't care the fate of the notebook. It mattered to him that each line was written with truth. In one of those nights of writing, Marina remembered her own parents, many years that do not I saw. Since that visit in which he set his conditions for them to form again part of his life, the contact was sporadic and cordial. "I knew they were older people who lived calm down in your neighborhood, and that to your way they felt pride, so there was done." One day, while reviewed papers ancient, found a letter that his mother had given him left hidden within a box of clothes, childish. "Sorry for not knowing how to love you when you needed it more. Your daughter changed he world, but you already had it started to change from the day you decided not to give up." Marina read it in silence, with tears in the eyes. That letter closed a cycle, not of total reconciliation, but yes, understanding. And that, sometimes, was all I did. Lack. As time went by, Diego's health began to deteriorate. It wasn't sudden, but progressive. The diagnosis, it was clear. One neuromuscular disease that would progress slowly. Diego took it calmly, like all in his life. "I have already lived many lives in this," he used to say. Marina, however, felt the weight of each little change, that I could no longer climb stairs with ease, that he would forget simple words, that he would need help with things that I used to do alone. Sophia also noticed it, although tried to. Maintain his mood was on fire. One afternoon, as she helped him dress, he said to her, "If one day I stop talking, remember me with the voice I used to read your stories." Marina heard him from the door, and it broke the soul, because I knew that love also hurt when it was lengthened a lot, but I also knew that there was nothing I couldn't do cross him through his side. During those months, Diego insisted in continue being part of everything. It accompanied meetings, helped with paperwork, supervised the growth of the new center, even if it was from a chair. One day, Sophia proposed to him, engraved short videos counting his version of the story. "I want it to remain you look too, Dad," he told him. He accepted. They recorded several sessions in his garden with the tree in the background. He talked about Marina, about his meeting in the square, how a woman pregnant showed him what it was he true meaning of living. I thought I was helping," he said with a laugh. "But in reality, she saved me." Marina couldn't see those videos immediately. It hurt too much, but they kept it carefully. And with the time, he knew that file it would be an eternal gift, because when his body would no longer accompany, Diego's voice would continue saying, "The most important, true love doesn't ask, it just stays." Latest winter they spent together was calm, slow, full of gestures minima but full of love. Diego no longer spoke a lot, but continued smiling with her eyes. Marina sheltered him, read to him in voice high. I spoke to him about the progress of the center as he could take decisions with a look. One night, while the rain hit his ceiling tightly, he took her hand and squeezed softly. It was his way of saying, "Thank you." Marina didn't cry. She just kissed his forehead and said, "You taught me to receive love without fear. Now, I hold." When finally he left, he went in peace, asleep in his house, surrounded by photos, drawings of Sophia, and the letters he loved to read. The wake was intimate, full of people who never there was acquaintance, but they owed him something. Women who had passed. They traveled through route of home from others' provinces just to leave him a flower. It wasn't a goodbye, it was a collective thank you for having stayed, for having loved. After Diego's departure, Marina allowed herself stall by first time. It was taken a few months sabbatical. He left day to day in the hands of the team and went to a small cabin near the field with Sophia. He needed silence, nature, and time. The first 4 weeks, he did nothing. He just walked, cooked, wrote some lines loose. Sophia respected that rhythm, accompanying her without invading. One evening, sitting in front of the fire, Marina asked him, felt like they were okay. Sophia nodded. "I miss Dad, but I feel fills. Everything he us gave go on here." Marina hugged her and knew it was true, because Diego had not been a chapter. There was been root, and those roots already were deep, widespread, alive in each what they did, in each woman who smiled when she arrived, in each sleeping child in peace, in every new seed that Sophia, now woman, began to plant by his account. Upon returning from that retreat, Marina returned different, not with less force, but with a serenity new. I no longer needed be in everywhere. I trusted fully in a team and about everything, in his natural cycle of life, form, deliver, release. Its role changed. It became a kind of mentor, silent, available when needed, but without protagonism. She dedicated herself further to write, to accompany processes personal and receive visits they wanted, know the history behind home route. Sometimes they arrived students, others times officials, others women, older people who came just to say, "I needed it too in my time." Marina listened to them with the same usual care. It didn't matter. They brought projects, wounds, or just curiosity. For her, Every person was a history waiting to be hugged. And even though she didn't say it, I knew she had arrived at the place he dreamed of so much in his youth. A home made not of walls, but of links. Sophia, by his part, had already been converted in a key figure. In the expansion of the project, its center in the interior was flourishing with Force Own, and there was started a training program to replicate he model in other regions. Root of Home was no longer a space physicist. It was a methodology, a philosophy, a way of understanding the accompaniment human. Marina saw her grow up with wonder and pride. He didn't interfere. He just watched. One day, while they reviewed together a presentation, Sophia asked her, "Any time you felt that everything this was too much?" Marina smiled and replied, "Yes, many times. But when love is real, it cannot be measured in effort, only in sense." That phrase was left recorded in Sophia's mind and became, years after, in he motto of a new training program that would promote in all he country, because that was her mother's greatest lesson, to do from love always. With the passing of the years, the decision tree became in an icon. People from other cities, and came to see him, not only for his beauty, but for what it represented. Each hanging leaf was a history of rebirth. There was those who hugged him as a personal right, those who unsigned letters were hanging, who they would just sit under its shade to breathe. Sophia decided make a documentary about the tree. She interviewed women who had left messages there. He collected images of the different stations, recorded sounds of the wind through the branches. Marina saw it by first time in a projection small with few people. He couldn't hold back the tears. "It's like see the story grow in slow motion," he murmured. That documentary, called Where the Root Begins, was shared in schools, universities and centers community, and each once it was projected, a conversation new it began, because the history of a house could also be the seed of many others. One afternoon, while I was walking alone he garden, Marina came across a young sitting under the tree, crying. She wasn't a resident nor voluntary. Simply there was come, because someone told her about the place. Marina sat down at her side without saying anything. After a while, the girl looked at her and said, "I didn't know where to go. I only knew that they weren't going to let me go here." "To throw?" Marina nodded gently. "Here nobody arrives late." He hugged her with the same delicacy with which he had hugged so many others before. And in that simple gesture, he felt the wheel was turning. Again, that everything started again, because the mission of Root of Home was not to save, nor cure, nor change he world. It was to be there, to be truly, when all the others' places fail, when he judgment wait more than help, when there is nothing left. There is a door open, one a look without questions, a silence that embraces. That was enough. In one of the anniversaries of the main center, organized a special ceremony, planting a new tree next to the original. This time, it wouldn't be Marina, not Diego, not even Sophia. They would plant it the sons and daughters who had grown in Root of Home, young people who now studied, worked, or simply had grown, knowing that love could also be collective. The ceremony was simple, full of emotion. Each one took a shovel, made a small gesture, and said a word that summarizes what that place is meant in his life. Shelter, strength, truth, my home. Marina the observed from a bench. With hands clasped about his lap, I didn't need speak. His work, she was talking to herself. When she finished, one of the young people approached him and said, "Thank you for have believed that moms could return to start. Thank you for that I had childhood." Marina hugged him with tears in her eyes. It was all she needed here. That night, while they kept the gardening tools, Sophia handed him a new notebook. "So you can continue writing. You're not finished yet." Marina greeted him with a smile. I had further gray hair, more wrinkles, and the body asked him rest, but his spirit continued awake. He sat down in his desk, turned on the lamp and wrote the first line. "Today, I saw growth another tree." Then he closed a notebook, kissed it affectionately and put it aside. He had no hurry. I knew that now it was Sophia who was wearing his fire on, and she just needed stay close, feeding the flame with his presence, with its history, with its faith, because the most powerful that there was built was not a center nor a system. It was an invisible chain of women who, when they looked at each other, knew, I can do it too. And in that recognition, silent, it began everything, always was beginning all. A couple of years further late, Sophia went invited to speak in a forum international on human rights. Marina accompanied her as listener, sitting discreetly in the back row. The room was full, and among the attendees there was academics, activists, authorities. But when Sophia took the microphone, did not use figures, neither speeches, technicians. He told the story of his mother, of how a woman rejected by his own family became in the heart of a movement of love. He spoke of how there was learned that the true change begin in the intimate, in the everyday, in look without judgment. I grew up among brave mothers, he said, and my mum taught me that accompanying is not leading. It's staying, even though it hurts. It's hugging without asking, explanations. When ended, the ovation was long. Marina did not get up, neither look for attention. He just clapped with tears, silent, knowing that I was seeing something that was going a lot further beyond her. It was the echo of everything that had sown. Upon returning from that trip, Sophia proposed something symbolic, to write together one last notebook, a four-handed testimony, mixing memories, lessons, and dreams. I don't want to leave only what you did behind you. I also want to leave behind how you felt, he told her. Marina accepted. They passed weeks sharing afternoon tea, writing in voice high, correcting herself with affection. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they stayed in long silence. The notebook is gone, filling with anecdotes, with thoughts intimate, of reflections about motherhood, the abandonment, faith, strength, community. When they finished, Sophia put it away in a wooden box with a note, so that the world remember that a house can begin on a park bench. Marina said nothing. She just stroked the lid with her palm. Open, because I knew that wasn't the end. It was another root throwing himself to the ground, and that, as always, something beautiful was going to bloom. With the time, the Marina's name began to appear in books, reports, even in educational material. But she continued living with the same simplicity as always. He walked by her garden, cooked for the new one's residents when nobody was waiting for her. She watered the plants without doing anything noise. The women who came to Raíz de Casa knew who she was, but they saw her further as a presence warm as I eat a figure distant. That's Marina, they said respectfully, the one who listens without haste. One day, a young new one approached her and asked, "Are you the founder?" And Marina, with her always smiling, he replied, "No." The founder was the moment in which a mother said, "I need help," and other replied, "I am here," because never wanted to be a heroine. She just wanted no one will pass, so she spent time alone. And that, since toward years, had been achieved 1,000 times. Sophia, already almost 30 years, decided it was time to create a foundation official to ensure that the legacy of Root of Home could continue further beyond generations. He put the name after his mother, but with a condition that Marina would not know. Until the day of the launch, she organized an event intimate with women of different stages of the project, volunteers, sons and daughters who already were adults. When arrive he moment showed the logo, a hand-drawn house, with roots leading down to form the word Marina. Seeing it, she was left in long silence. Then he stood up, took a microphone and said, "I have no words for this. I just have gratitude for everything I've experienced. And because you taught me that I was not alone, nor not even in my moments further dark." It was the last time he spoke publicly, not out of sadness, but because I felt that already there was saying everything you need. The rest would continue growing in other voices. After launching the foundation, Marina retired definitely from management. He returned to live in a small house, not very away from the first center, with a garden simple and one rocking chair in a porch. He spent his days reading, writing long letters by hand, and receiving visitors from time to time. I wasn't looking for recognition, no nostalgia, just peace. Sometimes I went out for a walk by the surroundings and met women who hugged her with emotion. Some said, "Thank you," through tears. Others just smiled with bright eyes. Marina responded always with the same thing. It was between all of us, because he truly believed it. Never felt that Raíz de Casa was a personal achievement. It was a collective fabric, built with hundreds of hands, some visible and others anonymous, and that made her feel calm, satisfied, like someone who has fulfilled his part and now can look grow what is planted without the need to intervene. One afternoon, anyone received a letter from Luciana, that one young man who did not speak when arrived, and that there was writing that felt as garbage. Now she was a mother of 3, a popular educator and collaborator in a new center in the South. I just wanted to tell you that each time you dug a woman arriving broken, I do it with yours arms, Marina. Because in you, I learned that sometimes it just makes stay. Marina read the letter, sitting down in his rocking chair, with the warm sun touching him the face. Closed eyes and took a deep breath. That letter was enough to close a cycle, to confirm that everything, even the deepest pain, can turn into something that relieves, into something that saves, into something that remains. He didn't do it, missing answer. Because I knew that there, far away, Luciana already had the answer, and that she, Marina, already there was left lit the flame that others would follow taking care of. As the days went by, Marina began to walk slow down, go to sleep further early, to talk less. Not out of sadness, but by the naturalness of time. Sophia visited her every weekend. Sometimes they cooked together. Sometimes they just sat down in a garden to look at the birds. They spoke little, but only what was necessary. In one of those afternoons, Sophia asked him, there was something that would have liked to do and didn't do. Marina thought some seconds and said, "No, I lived more than I dreamed of." And it was true. His story, which had started in abandonment, there was transformed the lives of hundreds of women, children, and communities whole. But more than that, there was sown a new way of understanding motherhood. Care, love, not perfect, not ideal, just human. And that's what mattered most to him. Leave as heritage, not a manual, not a model, but a spirit. When the days were made still slower and the body began to fail more frequency, Sophia moved temporarily with her. He slept in his guest room. I read to him in voice high the texts old, and sometimes they lay down together in his armchair like when she was a child. One night, Marina asked him for something special. "I want the day I leave to plant another tree, but not here. And let them plant it in a place where there is nothing yet, on dry land, because so began everything." And that's where all comes back to start. Sophia nodded with tears. She understood better than anyone else. And although his heart broke as he imagined the farewell, he also knew that his mother wasn't leaving completely. She was staying in each outbreak, in each history told, in each woman who dared to touch a door unknown and say, "I need help," because that was home route, and Marina knew that better than anyone. The day Marina left, the house was in silence, like all the air stopped by respect. There was none sirens, nor emergencies, nor speeches. Sophia was at his side, holding her hand. On her face there was no desperate pain, but deep gratitude. Before closing eyes, Marina managed to whisper, "It was all worth it." Those were her last words, and they were enough. The next day, the news spread through the network of centers by the groups of former residents, for communities whole. Women who knew her and others who had only ear talk about her, they lit candles, they shared photos, they wrote messages. It wasn't mourning, it was a celebration. A life that had touched so many others, that there were lit so many fires, that his absence was hardly physics, because Marina already lived in every hug without judgment, in each welcome without questions, in each place in the world where women said, "Here I'm safe," such as there was order. Sophia and the equipment, they planted a new tree, not in He Center field, but on a piece of land arid where they would build a new center. They planted it in silence, with hands on the ground, without ceremony official. They were just them, their daughters, their sons, their granddaughters, symbolic. Next to it, they placed a stone plaque that read, "Where no one wanted to stay, she decided, start." That tree was watered by shifts, by all of them, and to a few months began to bloom, like Marina, like every story that began broken and ended up standing. In the years following, that tree became into a new symbol, and although the world changed and the forms evolved, the spirit followed intact, because some people don't need statues, neither streets with their name. They just need your way of loving is repeated. And Marina did it again and again, every time that a woman decided stay, breathe, and come back to begin. With the passing of the years, Marina's story was narrated in multiple languages, in composed songs by women grateful, in plays school children, in murals painted in center's community, but nothing captured his essence better than the stories oral, those that were counted at the foot of the bed, during a round of mate, or in the welcome workshops. She didn't ask where you came, they said, just you. Open the door. The most young. People imagined it as a legend, someone impossible to be so good. Those who knew her, they knew it was real, with flaws, tiredness, mistakes, but always with the arms open, and that it was enough, because in a world accustomed to measuring people by what they produce, she there was elected measure them for what they feel and for what they deserve, just for exist. That was his revolution, silent, and for that was still alive in each corner where it will be grown, tenderness. Sophia, with the years, became in a global reference. He traveled little, but his voice resonated far away. Whenever he spoke on a stage, it began same. I am the daughter of a woman who was expelled from her home by being pregnant, and that turned that pain into home for thousands. It didn't matter he language, nor he country. The story, it touched everyone, because it was universal, because all, in some moment, they have needed to be welcomed. In a conference in Chile, after a presentation, and a young man approached him and said, "My mother told me about Raíz de Casa. She always wanted a place, so thanks to have it made possible." Sophia hugged her strong, and as he looked up at the sky, he thought in Marina, in how a solitary decision, in a square, there was created a legacy immense, and he understood that his mission was not to keep his mother's memory alive. It was to continue opening doors, as she did, to the 20 years since the founding of Raíz de Casa. They organized a global meeting with representatives of all the centers that had born inspired for Marina's story. They arrived women of different ages, cultures and accents, some with their children, others with fellow fighters, others alone, but with one conviction shared: the world changes when you listen to it. Heart. The meeting was not solemn, it was festive. It was filled with songs, workshops, games, hugs, and tears. On a huge wall, they put a timeline where each center could paste a photo, one phrase, a brand. At the end of the day, the line I no longer had space. It was a constellation of stories, and in He Center, a simple image, Marina, sitting in his rocking chair, looking at the tree with a cup of tea. Sophia took the floor at closing the event and said, all this was born because a woman did not give up when everyone closed the door on him, and today millions are grateful for it. In that same meeting, they presented a new book that compiled letters from women from all over her world they had passed by some of the centers. It was called Where It Begins, the Hug, and it was a choral testimony to Marina's impact. No one wrote it alone. It was woven with real words, with stories minima that together formed a force indisputable. Sophia wrote her prologue. This book does not count a story. Tell what happens when a woman decides to stay next to another. When presenting, they placed it next to the first notebook written by Marina. Next to it, a plate, simple. She believed that no one I had to cry alone, and so began everything. There was no applause, just silence excited, because when something is so true, words are unnecessary. And Marina had taught that sometimes the most powerful is not speaking, but stay and look and hold. After the event, many people began to visit the original tree, not like tourists, but as who approaches a secular altar. Some sat to write, others simply they played his trunk. Most cried in silence, and all of them, in some way, they left there different. Sophia decided then they would not fence it, nor transform it in monument. Let it continue being a tree, he said, like her had dear. Every now and then, a new girl or boy hung a paper without knowing exactly what it was about, just repeating the gesture they had seen. And so, without names, without signatures, the wheel continued spinning, because what Marina had created was not a care center. It was a way of being in he world, a way of looking at the others as possible, such as valuable, such as worthy of care. And it didn't die, it multiplied. Years further later, when Sophia was already an adult, a mother too, and general director of the international network of centers, she received a handwritten letter. It came from an older woman who had arrived at root of home in the first years, and now lived in another city with his grandchildren. The letter said, "I never knew how thank your mother, but you, yeah, I can tell you. Thank you for not having it left alone when he held everyone." Sophia cried in silence when reading it, and that night, sitting in his desk, wrote something that he would keep for his own daughter. Still small. When you grow up, you will know that once your grandmother slept in a square, embracing his belly and its dignity broken, and that since there he built his home, most loving in the world. It was his way to close his circle, to maintain the flame was lit, because Marina's story was no longer just a memory. It was a living root. It was an inheritance. It was a guide. As time went by, Marina's story began to be taught in schools as part of a citizenship and human rights curriculum, not as a figure idealized, but as example of what can arise from pain when you choose transform in place to repeat. Girls and adolescents, they listened attentively, many sometimes with tears. Some were encouraged to tell their own stories, relatives. Others, they decided, write letters to women they admired. In many corners of the country emerged projects called Roots, the House of All, Bridge Women, all inspired in one way or another by that woman who at a time was rejected by being pregnant, and that, instead of closing, it opened a door. Marina was no longer there physically, but lived in each center, in each decision of love, in each woman who dared to stay next to another without asking her explanations. One day, Sophia received a special invitation. Plant a tree in his same bank in the square where all there was started. The municipality had decided transform that space in a small garden, public called The Embrace. Upon arrival, Sophia sat alone in the bank with a small plant in hands, closed the eyes and remembered all. The cold of that night, his mother's belly, the silence, the I meet. When opened the eyes, one crowd watched her in silence. He planted the tree without speeches, just placed next to it a stone with a phrase simple. Here began everything, and so he last circle, because that wasn't just it, he place where Marina had touched background. It was the place where there was also sown his hope. And now, many years after, That place, it, was no longer a symbol of abandonment. It was a symbol of rebirth, of what can flourish when someone, even with him broken heart, choose stay. They passed many years. The tree grew strong in that square, and with it grew up new generations who, although they did not know Marina, lived surrounded by their legacy. Sophia, already grown up, used to sightseeing by there in silence, sometimes accompanied by her daughter, others sometimes alone. At every step, I found traces of his mother in a mural, in a phrase graffiti in a bank, in a little girl who played without fear. One day, while I was having a coffee in front of the garden, a young man approached him and said, "My mother spoke to me about Marina, as if I were an angel. But now I understand that it was just one woman who chose not to give up, and that is still further powerful." Sophia smiled, touched by those words, because yes, Marina had been just one woman, but that women change, world of many others, not for being perfect, but by have truly loved, and that in the end was all that mattered. That night, upon returning home, Sophia wrote a last phrase in his notebook. "My mother did not build a house, he built a language. And each time that a woman says, 'I am here,' she come back to life." He closed a notebook calmly, placed it on the shelf next to the others and turned off the light. He didn't cry. He didn't do missing. Because when a history is so real, so necessary, so alive, it never ends. It just changes its voice. And Marina would continue speaking in every tree planted, in every outstretched hand, in every story that began where sometime all it seemed finish. Because there are women who not only live, they found futures, and she was one of them. This story has come to an end. If you inspired, you excited, and you did reflect, please give it a like huge. Don't forget comment that it was the most valuable to you from Marina's life. And the most important, subscribe to the channel and share this video for your legacy and others' stories. Incredible follow, reaching millions of people. Your support means everything to us.